Greetings and welcome to Phantom's Edge. This will be chapter 15 of this reading. Gregory and Marilyn wandered the city, checking in on every pub they came by. They were about to call the search off until the captain finally found who was waiting for him. She was actually the man's first love, but he had to leave her for her choice of life, thus forgetting her. However, with what's happening in the bureaucracy, the captain had to rethink his own life. The Kanai motioned to sit at a table next to the feline drinking a small glass of wine. Perseone just stood at attention nearby, watching and listening in on the two captains' conversation. Gregory looked over at the feline and said, "Hello again, Brunhilde. How are you doing?" Brunhilde smiled as she looked over at the Kanai and replied, "Just took care of a problem, but I'm alright." The waitress brought over a mug of beer for the Kanai, then left as he grabbed his drink, and the captain continued, "I miss you, Greg. Why was it we couldn't be together?" "Well, mainly because of my father." "Stop listening to your father. He's nothing but an idiot compared to us, especially you." Brunhilde moved her left hand to hold the man's right, while she continued, "Quit the military. They don't deserve you, neither does that dumb bimbo bitch Josephina. So please, stay with me." "Back off!" Marilyn barked as she moved to stand in between the two captains. She turned to face the feline and continued, "You have no right being here, wench. My captain's heart belongs to another, and that's that, so beat it." Gregory stood and calmly turned to gently push aside the commander as he said, "Please, Marilyn, let it go. It's over. Brunhilde's right." The Perseone looked over at her captain, confused, and asked, "But I thought you said Captain Jacqueline was your true love." Brunhilde laughed, making everyone in the conversation look over at the feline. Then the woman said, "Honey, Greg has no idea what he really wants. However, with a little persuasion, I can reveal his inner nature." "Don't worry about it, Marilyn," Gregory said. "If you want to stay, then do so. Otherwise, just leave us alone." Marilyn looked over at her captain and pushed him, not really to move him, but to get herself away. She was angry and sad, crying in hatred knowing the man had used her, while upset that he would say someone else was his love, when they really weren't. In her stance, Marilyn barked, "How can you just betray someone you love for another so easily, Greg? What kind of man are you?" The Kanai quickly removed his yellow jacket and tossed it at the Perseone, getting angry as he said, "One that would rather do as he pleases than be ordered by one of his own blood. Now leave. I'm done with my father, the military, Jacqueline, and especially you." Just letting the jacket hit the floor, Marilyn barked, "How dare you do this to me, mutt? Be gone, coon." Just then, Gregory slapped his left hand across Marilyn's face. She stood hyperventilating a bit, her eyes aimed to the floor. Then she tried not to look back at the man as she stomped out of the pub. Marilyn headed back to headquarters, motioning into an empty room to sit down and sulk. After a few minutes, Catherine walked in to find the Perseone in her down state and moved to sit at her side. Catherine comforted the soldier as she asked, "Miss, what's wrong?" Marilyn replied, He's gone, Catherine. Gregory's gone." "What happened? Is he dead?" Marilyn shook her head. Then Vice Admiral Edison walked in and asked, "He left for her, didn't he?" The two Perseones on the couch glanced over to see the Kanai standing at the other end of the room, while Marilyn replied, "He quit the military and left for some stupid feline pirate." Edison sighed as he shook his head and looked down, then said, "Well, I know he didn't want to marry Josephina, but she would have been a good mother and an excellent wife to him. I had hoped he'd never see the black cat again. I also knew he wanted Jacqueline. I saw how he looked at her, so I went around whenever I could to find out more about her." The man then walked over to the group, holding a piece of paper as he said, "However, I found this." The Vice Admiral tossed the paper over to Marilyn, where she read it to find it was an old letter from the notorious pirate Captain Kaio, the Dual-Edged Demon. It spoke about meeting him at the Phantom's Edge, and how he loved Jacqueline very much and wanted to continue being with her. After reading the letter, the two women looked up at Edison as he said, "I was hoping to ignore it, thinking everything would fall apart with Jacqueline's determination towards the bureaucracy. Apparently, I was wrong. Lately, she's been taking off without informing anyone. I believe her subordinates are involved as well, only keeping the secret farther under our noses." Marilyn looked forward in her seat, continuing to cry yet growing angry as she said, "I know how to end this." She then looked up at the Vice Admiral and said, "Give me a ship and I'll hunt them both down, sir." Edison stood silent for a moment, then said, "I've already arranged for you to command the new Patronage 5 and a crew willing to follow you, Captain." The Vice Admiral then turned to leave the room, while he continued, "Take out Kaio first. Then we will end Jacqueline's life without anyone outside these walls knowing." Marilyn calmed and took her stance with her promotion from the couch, crushing the letter in her left hand as she said, "Yes, sir, Admiral. I'll do as you ask, for this world's peace, for the bureaucracy of Filey." Meanwhile, Captain Jacqueline and her subordinates, James and Rita, ran over to Phantom's Edge when Thomas was in the commotion of being chased. They came to find no one was at the area, but decided to wait. Captain Jacqueline stood at the edge of the peak, while her commander and lieutenant stood guard behind her. A few minutes passed, then a rapier sword was tossed to stab into the ground near the back of Jacqueline's feet. The two subordinates reached for their weapons, but halted from drawing them as they realized who had thrown the blade. Captain Kaio stepped out from the forest with his cutlass and saber drawn, moving to stand against the bureau soldier as he said, "Let's go, Jackie. If I can't have you, then no one will. And if I'm going down, then so will the whole bureaucracy." Jacqueline turned to the pirate, uncaring by his actions, then reached for the rapier in the ground with her left hand. With that, the commander and lieutenant stepped away to give the two captains room, while the female Kanai pulled out her own rapier with her right hand. As Jacqueline readied herself against the dual-edged demon, she said, "It's finally down to this, demon. You, me, and our blades." Kaio devilishly smiled, then the two took their fighting stances. They stared off for a minute, letting the wind blow by to sway their fur, then jolted for each other. With their great skills and amazing speed, the subordinates watching couldn't tell most of what was going on. Kaio and Jacqueline struck blades at high speeds, nearly impossible for any to reach, while quickly stepping around the peak. Every so often, the two fighters dodged by either leaning away from the other's swing or jumping away. They actually cut down a few trees, scarred the grass-covered ground, and even sliced a few holes in one another's clothes. At one point, the two stood still with their feet, but continued clashing blades. Afterwards, they struck their left-hand swords against one another so hard they broke free of their grasp. The blades shot up and spun around in the air, then came back down and stabbed into the ground a few feet from the two warriors' position. At the same time, the two Kanais raised their secondary swords with both hands and locked edges, their blades still able to press against one another's neck, aiming the edges at a jugular. If either one was to try and move away abruptly, the other would slice that area of the neck open and force them to quickly bleed out. The man and woman stared viciously into each other's eyes, daring not to blink as they kept their focus on the opponent. Having seen the loose blades fall, both James and Rita called out, "Captain!" They had feared that something bad happened, though there was nothing to tell. Little did they know, the fight was just getting started. Without fail, both swordsmen safely pushed away and began striking their blades against each other's once more. They then struck one another's swords so hard that both weapons slipped out and flew up a few feet. However, neither one wanted to grasp the flying weapons, only jolted back to grab the ones already stabbed in the ground. They moved to try and strike each other once more, then kicked the other's blade that was falling straight back up into the air, far above their heads. The bureau soldier and pirate continued against each other, holding their hilts tight in their left hands, yet kicked up the swords that tried to fall every time they neared the ground. Eventually, the fighters grasped their other swords in their right hands and began using them once more. Unfortunately, the dual-edged demon overpowered his foe with his speed, strength, and unimaginable movement. Kaio doubled up his swings on each blade, spinning every so often with his motions, while pushing back the bureau soldier towards the edge's end. The commander and lieutenant wanted to step in to stop the fight, but were too baffled by the pirate's ability. He even struck Jacqueline's rapiers with his boots to bat them away. Finally, Kaio broke both rapiers in Jacqueline's hands from half a foot to the hilt. Then he just simply stood up and lowered his blades to stare off at the woman. Jacqueline, with the motion from her swords being destroyed, threw her arms out and let go of the hilts to toss them over the side of the cliff. However, she slipped and lost her balance, moving to fall off the ledge as well. Before plunging to her death, Kaio leaned over and grabbed Jacqueline's shirt with his left hand, having dropped his blade and stabbed the other in the ground behind him to keep both the bureau soldier and himself from falling. The pirate held the soldier dangling from the cliff for a moment, then pulled her up as he tossed her back onto safe ground. Kaio turned to the bureau captain as he pulled out his cutlass from the dirt, while Jacqueline moved to sit up as she faced the pirate. Both James and Rita went to help stand their captain on her feet, while Kaio smiled and asked, "Now, wasn't that fun, Jackie?" Once the female Kanai stood, Jacqueline's subordinates released their hold on her as she looked up at the pirate and said, "I see you've gotten better, demon. Not bad." Kaio stomped his right foot on the tip of his saber that was on the ground, getting the hilt to bounce up near his left hand. He grasped the weapon and aimed it forwards with his cutlass, yet kept both swords lowered at his sides. The commander and lieutenant unsheathed their blades and raised them against the pirate, but were signaled by their captain to stand down. Jacqueline raised her right hand to halt her subordinates. Then she lowered it along with their blades, as she said, "You've beaten me, pirate. You, and all the other pirates before you, have won. There's no one in the bureaucracy who can defeat you now." "Wrong," he said. Kaio placed his weapons in their sheaths, then removed the rapier sword's sheath as he shed a single tear from each eye. He tossed the sheath over the edge of the cliff, then continued, "I can never truly hurt you, Jackie. You are the only one who can defeat me, even without a weapon, without any knowledge or skill in combat. I came here not to fight you, but to try and call you over to me one last time." Strangely, Kaio started stepping back from the three soldiers before him, nearing the edge's end. Slowly making his way to his death, the pirate said, "I will always love you, Jackie." "What are you doing?" "I hope you will always love me too." "Stop what you're doing this instant." The male Kanai's feet halfway past the edge, Kaio stopped as he shed his last tears and said, "May our paths cross again, Jackie, be it in this life or the next." The pirate raised his hands out from his sides, then fell back to let his body plunge over the cliff and towards the rough sea far below. Just as the man went to fall, Jacqueline tried to rush over and save him as she shouted, "Kaio!" The captain slid along the grass, trying to stop herself from running off the ledge, with her commander and lieutenant grabbing a hold of her jacket as they just kept from nearing the edge. All three leaned over to look down at where Kaio had fallen, only to find he didn't commit suicide. Instead, he landed on a large flat carrier holding an immense amount of cotton that was being tugged by a small boat. "That son of a bitch," Jacqueline said, being relieved that the pirate hadn't killed himself. The three stood up straight, while James looked over at his superior and asked, "What will you do now, Captain?" Jacqueline was a little angry, yet happily watched as Kaio stood unharmed from the cotton he safely landed on and waved his right hand up at her. She then said, "That damn dog. He tricked me. Somehow he knew I still cared for him, pretending to take his life as a means to show proof of our love. Our love, Captain? Rita asked, raising a smirk on her face as she turned her eyes towards her superior. Jacqueline sighed, then smiled as she replied, I admit it. I still love that dirty canine. She watched as the dual-edged demon was dragged to a ship waiting far out at sea. Then she turned away to face her subordinates and continued, Guess I better go resign from my post now before anyone gets suspicious. We're with you, Captain. James and Rita both complied. Caio and Brunhilde had planned everything out accordingly. They knew Thomas would get caught within the bureaucracy headquarters, having everything set to get him out and to diminish the military's might. They knew a spy was giving away some of their secrets and locations to the bureaucracy, since someone left without informing anyone and another pirate caught an image of a woman entering the bureau. They even knew when and how to take off to meet up with those Thomas informed, knowing the boy could easily fend for himself against a few soldiers. The dual-edged demon and the black cat also set out the most elaborate escape plans that no other could follow. Caio's, of course, being his fall from Phantom's Edge, and Brunhilde's being an unknown underground tunnel from the bar back to the docks. The ship was moved for the purpose of the Kanai's insane stunt, then was to sail back and reunite both Brunhilde and Thomas with their crew. However, neither of the three pirates were expecting to gain Perry as a new member on their last day to Filey, and wielding a sword of the Lepore design, no less. This concludes the reading of Chapter 15. Thank you all for watching and listening. If you like what you've seen and heard, be sure to check out my other two novels, Lore of the Endelment and Ryu the Demon Slayer. Link will be in the description below. Other than that, stay safe, take care, and we'll see you again next week, reading Chapter 16.